see you. Welcome.
How are you?
Have a seat.
Thank you.
We introduced you on the program as founder and owner of Busboys and Poets, which is absolutely correct, but I want to flesh that out for people a little bit and describe you the way you were described in the Washington Post last year. They ran a profile, which some of you may have seen. This was back when you were running for mayor. And they described you this way, as an Iraqi-American...
Don't read that one. Don't read that one.
This is good. You'll like it. Iraqi-American scientist turned poet, painter, activist, and multimillionaire restaurateur. This is not a bad life you've carved out for yourself. You're having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I have to say that Busboys and Poets, for those of you who have not been, does make the best spinach salad in D.C.
Thank you.
For my money. It's the wheat berries. Who knew?
Yes, indeed.
They're good.
Yeah, they're marinated.
They're American.
Yeah.
I had no idea that I needed them in my life, but they're good. And let me stick with the multimillionaire restaurateur bit of that bio that the Post gave you. I was in Busboys and Poets, the one I guess nearest to here, over on 5th and K. A couple of weeks ago, I had a friend in town from LA who was here to give a book talk, and we were trying to figure out where to go to dinner afterward. And I said, well, let's go over to Busboys and Poets. And he said, Busboys and Poets? What is that? And I said, well, it's just, it's a restaurant, but it's a cafe, and it's a bar, and it's a bookstore, and there might be a poetry slam going, and there'll almost certainly be live music. And the point being, what you do is unique. I mean, it is now. It certainly must have been a decade ago when you dreamed this up. What was the vision you had for this thing that DC needed and didn't have?
Well, like most entrepreneurs, they look for something that they want to see happen, and when they don't see it, they think, oh, maybe I could do it. So I think that's how it started. The idea that having a place that has multi-layers in it, so you don't have to go in your car and go from one thing to another, where you go to eat something and then have to go somewhere to do a show or maybe to a bookstore or something like that. I wanted to have those spaces all within one space. A lot of people walk inside the space and you say, you stole my idea. I can't believe you stole my idea. And I always tell them which part of it. Like, is it the bookstore? That's not that original. The bar is not that original. The restaurant's been around for a while, so I didn't invent restaurants. So all of these things in and themselves are ideas that we all are familiar with. Is putting them together and making them run well. Honestly, is the challenge. A lot of times you have a lot of these layers, but one of them isn't quite where it needs to be, and then you end up with having it not be as fulfilling of an experience as you would want it. So it was basically out of a need that I thought the city needed. The other thing is I wanted something that people would walk in and say, this is so DC, because I was really getting sick and tired of people saying this is so New York. Everywhere you go, somebody walks in and they say this is so New York about anything that they think is cool. And I thought, you know what? DC has pretty cool stuff, and we need to have our own identity. Like, if you think about this is so DC, when was the last time you thought that has a positive connotation? It's not very often, right? So I wanted a place that represents DC. So I started looking at the layers of what that looks like. So DC is a very political city. It's a very multinational city. We have lots of embassies and people from all over the world. It's a very literary city. I mean, a literate city, I should say. A lot of people read in this city. We have lots of universities. We have more universities in this town than we have high schools. We also have one of the highest literacy rates, but that's beside the point. So all of these elements together, and of course being, this is Chocolate City. It is a city that's predominantly black. It's dwindling. The numbers are dwindling. It's though, it's like 50-50 at this point. But still, I wanted a place that represents that kind of ethos. And having, gone to many restaurants and going out often, I see that doesn't quite often happen. You go to restaurants that have a certain type of people or a certain group, and you don't really get a chance to intersect. And I think that's what I was looking for.
Have you achieved that golden moment where a New Yorker walks into your restaurant and you overhear them saying, God, this is so DC?
No, New Yorkers are so arrogant, they still say this is so New York. But
that means they like it.
Yeah, I said, no, stop it. This is DC. And it's interesting because a lot of New Yorkers and developers have sought me out to come to open a place in New York. I thought, wow, New Yorkers never ask anybody to come there. They always go out to do something else. Are there any New Yorkers here that I'm dissing right now? I just want to make sure. Yep, they're one. You're outnumbered here, buddy.
I read that you like to go to your restaurants, go eat there, take your wife, and then leave a note critiquing the food afterward.
Yeah, I think every business person does that has any kind of a business they go in with.
Do they quake in terror when they see you come?
Well, no, I'm not that terrifying. I'm actually pretty nice, and I leave good tips.
Oh, there you go.
I'm a really good tipper.
All right, there you go. You have how many locations now in DC? Are you?
We have 6, and we're opening a 7th.
In Anacostia.
In Anacostia.
What's the timeline on that?
The timeline, Anacostia has its own time. It runs on a special time. So it's a little bit delayed, as a lot of projects are in this city sometimes. But we're looking at probably opening sometime in the fall of 2016, which is less than a year from now.
What has that experience been like? I mean, you talk about that Anacostia operates on its own clock. You also, your flagship on 14th Street, the one I'm always in over on 5th and K, those are places that maybe weren't restaurant destinations a decade ago, but aren't now. I mean, there was a lot of people, foot traffic, other people going out to dinner around there. Anacostia is a bit of a different prospect.
Well, let me give you a little bit about the topography in the city. So you have 8 wards. Ward 7 and Ward 8 combined, well, east of the river, Ward 7 straddles the other side of the river. That's the Anacostia River. East of the Anacostia River, if you count all the sit-down restaurants, all of them, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you get 4. All right, now wrap your head around that. If you were to look at 14th Street, just as a street, from Thomas Circle, up to about Florida Avenue, you have 100 restaurants. That's on one street. This is Ward 2 and Ward 1. So when you think in those terms, it really becomes mind-boggling how a whole section of the city, and the populations are, it's not like there's no people that live out there. They want restaurants, and they want places to eat. I've always wondered why there isn't any places there. And it was a big challenge, really, to try to even find a place, find a location, and find a landlord that is receptive to opening a restaurant there. And
it's counterintuitive. You think they'd be thrilled if a successful restaurant owner came and said, we want.
There's a lot of fear, a lot of apprehension, a lot of concern about gentrification. This is a town that deals with that in a very serious way. And a lot of people think of gentrification as being, just having more white people in a neighborhood. Like, what's wrong with that, But I think what it is, it's for a lot of people, it's about displacement. It's about people being pushed out. It's not just about having people come in. It's a displacement process. And I think that's a huge fear. And it's a very serious fear, I mean, for a lot of people, I was asking, what is it about, who doesn't like the idea of a clean alley and safe streets and a good coffee shop? And, everybody likes that, right? Blacks, whites, everybody likes that. But the idea of a cultural change, a cultural tsunami that changes the whole feeling of when somebody's walking down the street. As a black person living in this city, and I'm not black, by the way, if anybody had any questions, but if a black person is living in this city and they're walking down the street in a city that has a lot of other black people, they feel comfortable. There's a sense of comfort. But if you're a black person and you're not part of a majority, or at least a fairly critical number, then you're looked at funny when you walk into a store, and you're looked at funny when you're walking down the street, or when you go down the bus, and all of these things. And I think that's the fear. That's the part that I think makes people kind of crazy about the idea of gentrification, why it's so significant for us to talk about it in terms of displacement as opposed to just nicer streets.
Bring this back to the business calculations you're making? Because you've been very clear all along with Busboys and Poets that you have a social mission going on here in terms of having people who look different from each other showing up, eating, what that can do for a neighborhood and how important that is to you. As a businessman, what are the calculations you're making of going into a neighborhood? Do you see, obviously, opportunity? You're going into a neighborhood like Anacostia where there's nowhere else to go. But how do you weigh the risks that you're taking on there as well?
That's a really good question. I have to find really good partners. I mean, part of my success is finding partners that are willing to take the risk along with you. So usually they're landlords. I deal with landlords. And so I wanted to, there was at one point I was going to purchase a building in Anacostia and, wait for it for a while and then build it out. I thought that was not a good model for me, particularly because I wanted to have it be more indigenous, more of a space that has a natural kind of base in order for me to go in it. So I found a nonprofit called the Forest Southeast Family Strengthening Collaborative, which has been around for many, many decades, for at least a couple decades or more. And they were the landlord for this building that I liked. And I went to them and I approached them. And it made perfect sense in that I'm going in there. I don't live in Anacostia. I'm going to Anacostia where my landlord will actually be a social services organization for that community. So I'll be paying them rent so that they could use that rent to be able to make the community better. So I thought that made perfect sense to me from the perspective of not only from the optics of it, obviously very important, but also the business model. They understood what my mission was and what I was going into. And so part of the way to sweeten the deal, to make sure that the deal makes perfect sense, is I wanted to hire people that actually live in that community. Because it wouldn't make any sense for me to open a place in Anacostia that has 18% unemployment, or maybe even more, and have to import people from outside of the area to have them work. So we are part of the program is we're putting together a leadership and culinary training program. And I'm very, very excited about that in particular because I think that will add that something else in there. And it's not just a culinary training program because there's a lot of culinary training programs in the city, but one that really does speak to direct employment. One that someone can go in there and train and be able to have a job next door, basically. To take it one step further, we're talking with a group out in New York. They're called the Hot Bread Kitchen, which is a social enterprise in New York run by this wonderful woman named Jasmine. And she had put together this bakery because she understood that baking was not only a great skill for people that actually pays a decent income, but also she was hiring women, black women and women of color who were living in some of the projects in East Harlem. And they would learn this baking skill and take it and run with it to work in other Tony restaurants all over town. And they sell a lot of their bread to the great restaurants in New York. So she wants to bring that model here to Washington, D.C., and we're going to partner together to make that happen.
We should mention as well, Busboys, you've made a point of paying people above minimum wage.
Yes, we do.
Providing health insurance, is that for everybody? Do you have to be there a certain period of time?
All of our part-timers have access to our health insurance. Well, now with Obamacare, everyone does. But we pay 50% of all of our line hourly staff their health insurance, and we pay 100% of all of our management team and supervisors. So that runs about, it's a hefty sum of money.
Okay. Questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Great forum, by the way. So I grew up in Anacostia, went to Anacostia High School, and then went to Howard, and then studied economics at the University of Chicago. Now, there's no place anywhere in the country where black people who have been in a community pre-gentrification have been better off post-gentrification. So that's part of what's driving this concern that you're seeing in Anacostia. The other side is when Benjamin Banneker designed the city, they meant for Anacostia to be the most valuable part of the city because of the views. You go back and read that sort of stuff. So I'm wondering what you're going to do differently, with your restaurant in Anacostia.
Do you think I need to do something differently? Is that what you're implying? Yeah, please.
So here's what I would suggest.
You asked for that.
You mentioned buying a building. We've seen Ben Miller at Fundrise use crowdfunding to provide.
Hold your mic up a little bit closer so we can hear you.
We've seen people use real estate crowdfunding to provide small-scale $100 investment opportunities for people in communities. Now, it has not been used in a black community. It's been used in a rich white community. So one of the things you could do is you could offer the residents of the community $100 shares in either the building or I don't know how you structure it, via crowdfunding as a way to energize and keep the community.
I don't own the building. I don't know if you heard that earlier. I don't own the building. I'm leasing from an organization. It's a really good point. My commitment is to my staff first and foremost. We hire a great number of people. In fact, the majority of our staff are people of color, and the majority of them are black. So our top management team is 2 black women from the area. So part of it is to give them shares in the business and really expand their wealth opportunity and their opportunity to succeed. We haven't really figured out a model, as you suggest, where we sell shares and go out to the community. And we've looked at it, but not really that seriously. I've always thought that too often, I think we have 700 employees, and by the time all said and done with Anacostia, we'll have another 100 or so. And if you add the culinary program, it may be another 50 or so. So we have a lot of people that we hire. Most of them are from the city. Most of them are from DC. And most of them are black people or people of color. So my first allegiance is honestly to them, to give them better salaries, to give them better benefits, and to make sure that they have equity in the business as well.
Last question. So this gentleman's hand right here. Hang on, they're making their way. We'll see who makes it to you first. There you go.
How did your joint venture with Politics and Prose begin, and was that a result of the new ownership by the former Washington Post reporters?
Great question. It was going to be my next one if we had infinite time.
Yes,
Politics and Prose.
The Politics and Prose idea. When I first opened the first Busboys and Poets, it was I wanted to put a bookstore. I knew that I wanted to do that. I had owned a bookstore years ago, and I knew bookstores are not something you just open. You know, they require a lot of work. They're much more work than one would imagine. But so I found an organization called Teaching for Change. And Teaching for Change is a nonprofit that brings social justice and civics education to schools. So they look at the curriculum, make sure that it fits those parameters. So Teaching for Change had been there for 10 years. They were expanding enormously throughout the country to do the work they do. Retail was not really their thing, you know. The bookstore was doing good. I mean, it was paying for its bills. But it was taking a lot of their time, a lot of their energy. So they came to me and they said, you know what, we'd like to end the relationship if possible. They left it up to me and see if you can find an alternative partner. And for a while, I thought I would do it myself. We found, I was invited to dinner serendipitously, and I sat next to the owners of Politics and Prose. Someone I think was trying to create a marriage there. And we had a conversation. And just flippantly, I said, you know what? You guys should come into my places. And, you know, Bradley and Lissa, the owners of Politics and Prose, looked at me like, I wonder if he's serious. And we exchanged emails, and emails turned into a sit-down. And we end up having this wonderful conversation where we're on the same page. And a lot of it, I think I'd had a relationship in the past with Carla from Politics and Prose. But our relationship was always somewhat strained, I have to say. She's a wonderful woman, but we didn't agree a lot on the stuff that has to do with the Middle East. She being Jewish and me being of Arab background, I think there was a little bit of tension there, honestly. I don't think it was from me. I think it was more from her, frankly. And I was looking at ways to kind of bring authors, Palestinian authors and others to Politics and Prose that never really took off, in a sense. And so I asked Bradley and I asked Lissa, I said, what is your opinion about those types of issues? And they're very, very wonderful and open to it. So I think that was that's how we started.
Well, we could go on for forever on the importance of good chemistry in a business relationship, but we are keeping all of you from cocktail hour. So, Andy Shalal, let me say thank you
It's my
very
pleasure.
much for
Thank
this.
you.
And bear with me for a second. Stay put for a second. Let me say a heartfelt thank you to all of our speakers today, to the moderators who've been jumping up and down on stage along with me, and mostly to all of you for coming today. Let me close with just 2 quick notes. The first is a request. You are all going to get an email with a survey about how this went. I guarantee you it will take no more than 3 minutes. There's also hard copies floating around. Whichever one you do, we would so appreciate you doing it. It really helps us figure out how to do this for the next time. So thank you in advance. The second note is an invitation. I said it's cocktail hour. In keeping with the theme of small business today, we've got DC Brow here, which is providing beer. We've got wine. We've got nibbles from local restaurateurs. So please join us, talk about everything you just heard, and thank you again very much for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.